Hello and welcome to our first Bruin Career Insights event on YouTube Live. My name is Angela Scales and I am a fellow Bruin, and I serve as the Senior Director of Bruin Connections here at the UCLA Alumni Association. Thank you all for joining us tonight as we explore the entertainment industry. To set the stage for tonight's event, we're embarking on a new series entitled Bruin Career Insights. These monthly YouTube Live events will focus on career development resources for every stage of the career life cycle. Some, like tonight's, will focus on a specific industry, allowing Bruins to gain insight from an industry expert. Others will focus on a specific skill set or a trend in the career space. In addition to this series, a great career resource is UCLA One. For those who aren't familiar with the site, UCLA One is the online career community exclusively for Bruins. If you haven't already set up your profile, it's quick and easy. Just visit uclaone.com and connect via your Facebook or LinkedIn profile. Tonight's event, we would love to hear your feedback and suggestions for upcoming topics. You can email us at careerprograms@alumni.ucla.edu with any thoughts. Also, a quick thank you to our Blue, Gold, and Life members for making events like tonight possible. It's through your continued support that we're able to provide career programming and resources for all Bruins. To introduce tonight's speaker, just one quick housekeeping measure. On your screen, you should see the live chat function. Using the live chat, you can send Brad, our speaker, any questions throughout the session. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible. To our main event. Our speaker tonight is Brad Hall, a sociology graduate of UCLA in 1991 and the founder of entertainmentcareers.net, the go-to website for careers in the entertainment industry. So Brad, why don't we start off by having you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in entertainment.
Thank you. My very first job in entertainment I was actually, I think in the third grade, I was in a piano commercial. And if you want to get a nice laugh, you can Google Brad Hall, Elton John commercial, and you'll see rapidly why I chose a career behind the scenes, not in front of the camera. I was horrible. But as an adult, I got really my first start when I was at UCLA. I needed a job, and so I sort of let everybody know I was looking for work. And I just, out of dumb luck and networking, the person was quitting their job at Warner Brothers, working for this director, and he said, hey, you want me to recommend you for the job? And so I truly lucked into perhaps one of the best entry points in the entertainment industry that someone could have. So when people ask me how did you get started? I say it's sort of like I slipped on a banana peel. So mine isn't the best story because I always preach, have to do hard work and networking. And it literally fell into my lap, with the exception of definitely letting people know that I needed a job. From there, I worked my last 2 years at UCLA at Warner Brothers. And then after graduation, worked there full time. It was for a husband-wife writer, directing producing team, and so I got to see the behind the scenes, the development side, and they produced very high-profile projects, and so got to see filmmaking at a very high level, at the studio level. From there, I wanted to go and find out literally how physical production worked, and so went for a couple of years and worked on various films and TV shows. And then I met an actor that I partnered up with and lucked into a great job where I got to produce a series of short films for the David Letterman show. Loved producing. Thought, wow, maybe I should do a feature. And then partnered up with some friends and actually produced my first feature. And then it was in the protracted post-production phase of that where I came up with the concept of entertainmentcareers.net. And for several years, I did both. I tried to do my producing and launching a company. And then once I sort of put all my efforts and energy into entertainmentcareers.net is when it really started taking off.
So what would you say were the lessons that you took away from those first couple of years?
The lessons of first couple of years. There's a long list of them. It's a steep learning curve. It's a funny industry that has a lot of unwritten rules. The best thing that you could do is, try and find a mentor or someone who can provide you, the shortcuts that a good mentor can. It's, geez, that is a good question. A lot of it is just you have to, take the time. Everything takes time. Everything, you want everything to happen so much faster. And it just, everything, like anything worthwhile, it just takes time to get good at, gain a reputation for being good and a professional, and things go from there. I think I was a little too impatient, and I think it hurt me a little bit. And so once I got a little bit more guidance, that my career definitely, when I got a series of mentors, is when I feel like my career actually started going places.
So in today's industry, given your expertise, what should a young professional focus on when they're networking or they're trying to build their resume?
Really, it's a matter of building, as far as building the resume, it's doing things that are relevant to the career that you want to pursue as best as one can. Obviously, being a Bruin, you're spoiled because you have a lot of resources, throughout the year. Most kids who don't go to UCLA, they have one shot, which is a summer internship. We're very lucky because we can get sort of micro opportunities. So building those experiences that are relevant, that puts you in that, also in that network that is more relevant to getting the jobs also. And again, with that concept of the networking is, I think people really overlook their peer level networking. Like, oh, I can't do anything, so why would someone else be doing something for me? And I think that's a huge missed opportunity for most young people, because, they think, oh, this joker next to me, he's doing the same thing I am. But ultimately, that's where your sheer numbers are. And also you get a lot of good intel. Someone went for an interview. Okay, what was the feedback about that company or that person? There is a lot of intel sort of at that peer level that most people ignore. And then also, as it's a long-term investment, because in 2 years, they will be, more entrenched in the industry. And then in 5 years, they'll be deeper in, and in 10 years, they'll be deeper in. So you do reap short-term and long-term dividends, but most people, I would say, forget about the peer level networking. And that's also the easiest part, because you can sort of figure out your system when it doesn't matter quite as much, because you want to work out your process of networking and how you do your follow-ups, so you can make a few mistakes and not have it cost you too much.
So given your world with the website, what would you say are some of the really common mistakes you see either in someone's resume or in the interview setting?
The resumes, oh boy, there's a long list of them. A big one, I actually dealt with it today, which is because the industry is so unique, there are certain types of resumes that the industry assumes you're going to have. If you're going into a world of production, you have something that is a production resume. If you're going into, a job at, a full-time staff position, where you're going for not something that's on set, it's a more of a traditional resume. And, we always call it fishing with the wrong bait. Is a lot of people try and get out of production, or they've done a lot of films in school, and they sort of submit that resume as they want to get a job at, for a production company, for an agency, and it's they are fishing with the wrong bait, because they're looking, employers looking at their, like, what am I supposed to do with this? So that's a big mistake, and that's sort of part of which is people not understanding what they were doing. A lot of it, and I get it. As a young person, you're sort of you're creating this thing. You're like, I don't know, I'll put this, and I'll put this, I'll put this. But I mean, if you do the research, it's sort of like market research. If you do the research and look at the job postings, the employers are very forthcoming with what they're looking for. So, what we see is, award-winning filmmaker, they got student award, they're pitching a skill set that the employer is not hiring them for. So it's an understanding of their place in what they're doing, and the jobs that they're going for. You're using the wrong sales tactic. And then as far as in the network or the job interview, it's mostly lack of preparation. It's just, I give example like entertainment networking night, that's the common question. And I'm like, it's just like trying to get into UCLA. Everybody, I believe UCLA is the most applied to university in the world. So clearly there's a strong desire for a lot of people to go to this school, but desire alone will not get you there. You have to have done the work, and you have to take that process seriously. You can't just show up and expect, hey, they're going to understand that, gosh, I've earned this, and I deserve to get this spot at UCLA. And if they don't understand that level of competition, they're not going to get in. And similarly with an intern or with an interview, one of the common things I always ask recruiters, I'm like, okay, give me your pet peeves. And it's because it's a waste of time. It wastes their time. It wastes the recruiter's time, because they know in 15 seconds, like, not hiring this person. They didn't do their homework. So it's not taking it, not giving it the proper attention it needs. So, we always preach a minimum of 60 minutes of research for an interview. And, I have people that we work with, and they're doing, several weeks, like hours and hours and hours, depending on the type of company or the type of information that's available or the position they're going for. So it's a lack of preparation is probably one of the biggest on both sides. But the resume mistakes I can go on all day with.
Compared to other industries, how would you say that networking and entertainment is unique? Are there tips that you have for navigating the networking space?
I think the uniqueness of networking for the entertainment industry is because it is so prevalent. It is a very social business because, and I always have to caution the way I say this because it comes off wrong. It's because there's no hard skill, right? We're not in surgery all day long. And so it's phone calls because you're trading information. You're trying to find projects, and then you're trying to find people who are going to fund projects and then who are going to buy projects. On various levels of the industry. So you're giving something to somebody and taking something from somebody. And a lot of it is information. And, in many cases, you have to spend years building up those relationships so you can ask those and get yeses. It's a lot of it is, I think the misinterpretation is, if you have something of quality, it will somehow miraculously appear on people's radar. And I think people underestimate the value of cultivating those relationships. And it is a very, very social business. And my word of caution to people is understand that this is a part of your job. It is not optional. It's not optional if you want to really succeed. And so you, again, have to take that with an approach, with a system. It's just like, like I say, students, like, if you sort of go into your first year at UCLA and you're sort of trying to figure everything out, you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And then you figure out your system. How do I survive the quarter system? And then you build in your process. And so because you're dealing with volumes and volumes of people, you want to make sure that you build your process on who have I followed up with? Who do I need to follow up with? When should I follow up with them? So things don't slip through the cracks. So it's because it is very important. I think that is the uniqueness and potentially the pitfalls. And I'd say one of the biggest mistakes that people make in this realm is being afraid to approach people, being afraid to ask, being afraid to follow. I don't want to be a pester. I don't want to be a bother. And because it's so critical, generally the people that we see doing multiple asks and, hey, sent you an email, but I'm just following back up. Those are the people that tend to do that in all arenas. And those, not coincidentally, the people that tend to get very, very good results, both finding mentors, getting interviews, getting jobs, and then developing their career.
As a strong proponent of mentorship, thanks for that lead in, how do you convert someone that you've networked with into someone who's your mentor? And does it vary depending on the stage you are in your career?
Yeah, I think it does vary. the best way for a young person to cultivate a mentor, I mean, there is UCLA One, which is a mentor platform. I believe I was an early adopter, and so it may have changed, but I remember when I signed up, I believe there was like a checkbox, like, are you willing to mentor someone? And so there are great tools out there. There's LinkedIn. There is, I know the Alumni Association always has something going on, because even old school, they had like a database where you could go in and look it up, and people would call me and say, hey, can I take you to lunch and ask you about your career? So alumni resources are enormous opportunity. As far as, sometimes it's almost like dating, which is sometimes there's a mechanism in place like UCLA One, and then sometimes it's cultivating a relationship, see who you click with, and then having the relationship naturally progress. Like some people will say, hey, you know what, let's identify 4 or 5 people that you already know. Sort of a cold call for a mentor is tough because, like anything, it's like, hey, if I called you, I'm like, hey, do you want to date me? You're like, oh, hey, easy, buddy. Let's get to know each other first. So the same concept here. So sometimes, we have people develop a sort of 5 people that they're going to approach, that they are going to ask, say, hey, I'm really looking for a mentor. Is this something you're interested in? Or do you know someone who would be interested in mentoring someone at my point of my career? And so those are more of you have already established the relationship. And then also, like, we had entertainment networking night, and part of that was students are supposed to find mentors, and as much as they were supposed to, no one really asked, how do I follow up with you, or can I follow up with you? And so a lot of it is sort of seeking out someone who's willing to give you a little bit of time, cultivating that relationship, and then it grows organically. Like sometimes people say, hey, I'm starting a business, will you mentor me? I'm doing this, will you mentor me? Or they just sort of, every 2 to 3 months say, hey, would it be okay if we got together for lunch or for a Google Hangout so I can let you know what's going on with me and we can catch up. So it happens sort of in forced ways and also happens in organic ways, but it only happens if you ask for it and if you pursue it. Those opportunities just don't fall in your lap.
On that note of the frequency of the interactions, what would be your tips on how to nurture the relationship with your mentor?
For me, when I talk to people, whether, I'm working with them or I'm sort of helping them navigate the waters, I think it's important for the mentee to understand that cultivating the relationship is really their responsibility. They're the one that sort of sets the tone because they're the one essentially asking. Obviously the mentors get something out of it, but it's very much a one-way relationship most of the time because you're helping someone else. It's not like really a truly symbiotic relationship, other than obviously both people enjoy it. And so part of it is the understanding, like, oh, well, I don't want to be bothered. For me, I always say if like they want to be mentored, I'm like, I need to hear from you at least once a quarter. If it's something pressing, if there's a job interview coming up, if there's a big life decision you want to talk about, we can sort of work through, don't be afraid to reach out. Like, sometimes if there's something, really important going on, or they've got a series of interviews, sometimes I'll talk to them 3 to 4 times a week. But it's short-lived, right? And so it's also, if the mentor-mentee relationship is formal, then you can sort of say, hey, when how frequently can we get together? And I'd say I think really quarterly is sort of a magic number at a minimum, because then you sort of fall off the radar and then you lose that relationship. But I think I'm a big fan of pushing people to say, it's not always asking something, just shoot an email saying, hey, this is what's happening with me. I hope all is well with you. And I've got one gal, a Bruin, who is phenomenal at follow-up. She is amazing. And she gets all this interaction from a lot of people. And I remember the first time I met with her, and she was talking about that she was emailing back and forth with this up-and-coming director. I'm like, how did this happen? She's like, I just kept emailing her until she responded to me. Very persistent. And as far as the frequency, yeah, there is there is too frequent. But people who say, I always say this, which is when say, oh, I don't want to be pest. I'm like, then your built-in radar will make it impossible for you to be rude. Because it's like, if you're concerned about, I don't want to be a bother, it's literally impossible to follow up too much in that realm. And I always say, I'm like, assume you have to ask someone 3 times, because first time, everyone's busy, it's like I get probably at least, probably 1,500 emails a week. And so sometimes, as much as I may have a great intention, and I do have a process of making sure that I follow up on things, sometimes things do slip through the cracks. And so I'm appreciative when someone loops back after, 7 to 10 days, if it's timely, and says, hey, you know what, I'm just following back up from that email. I'm like, oh, thanks for the follow-up. I think it's good to know where that pressure point is. And, if you're concerned that you're following up too much, I always say you have to apply generally more gas and less brake, because people are very cautious about, being respectful of people's time, and they string it out way too long. Like I had, at Entertainment Networking Night, several people that I met from the Bruin Development Academy from earlier this year or last year. They're like, oh my God, I just want to say hi. And I'm like, well, why haven't you followed up? I'm like, oh, I don't want to be a bother. And it's, for both of us, it's a missed opportunity. So more gas, less brake.
That's great advice. From your vantage point with the website and your experience in the industry, what areas of the industry do you think are growing and which are shrinking?
It's really interesting. I mean, the timing of this is amazing. Because up until, I would say 3 years ago, the film industry was shrinking. I mean, it has shrunk. And if we didn't have original programming from Netflix, Amazon, and Hulu coming online, I would say that segment, like the production side, would have been cratering big time. But that has definitely filled the gap, or filled the void that, sort of that, sort of shying away from quantity, like making fewer films for more money, bigger tentpole films, to now there is an abundance of production work, both in LA and New York now. And for people in production, it's much better. With the exception of that, as I would say, is reality or unscripted. That we've seen a notable downturn. I would say there's probably, I feel badly for the people who pursued that and it's all they know in their career, because they're hiring about 40 to 50% fewer people than they did even a couple of years ago. The budgets have gone down. People are, doing the work of 3 people normally. So we'd say that is definitely what we have seen done a major decline. That's the bad news. The good news is, as a young creative person, I don't think there's ever been a better time to be alive, because there are so many opportunities, with this short format content production. Everybody is hiring someone to produce content. And, where 10 years ago you'd see someone, oh, I need a writer and a director and a producer to create these, segments. Now it's, oh, we want you to be a writer, director, and a producer. Oh, P.S. we also want you to shoot the project. You want me to have some lighting skills, and you need to edit it. So people that enjoy that sort of having all that, it's very much like making student films. So young people who have those skills, there are a lot of opportunities for them. Granted, they're not going to be hired straight out of school to do this type of work, but within a short period of time, you really can be producing things that will be, on digital properties. Another area we see is sort of the bigger version of that, which is, now there's this really high-end content production. It's sort of like fake commercials or, viral commercial. People are doing all these great, like I just saw this one great Keurig ad that was all about the first day of a production assistant. And it was really a great film. And then you're like, oh, it's an ad after all. So really interesting opportunities there. I mean, it's more or less the people who've occupied the commercial production space are doing that. But, there's been that hint of no one's watching TV. So commercials are, going to the wayside. So, that's an interesting new growth area. Also live events. both music. I mean, obviously with the sort of, implosion and rebirth of the music industry, everyone sort of realized, oh, the way we make money is concerts. So live event production, huge area. Also live shows, like, live show versions of, TV character shows. All these, we have companies that are touring around the country constantly, Tickle Me Elmo show and all these things. We've got all this type of work. So a lot of stuff. Also, as crazy as this sounds, which I certainly would never say 15 years ago or 10 years ago, the cruise industry, like, they are making enormous investments in entertainment. I mean, they used to be these sort of like hokey little shows, you're like, oh my gosh, this entertainment, it's like, that's where you went, that's where your career went to go die, was like out at sea. But now it's like, I mean, they're making, these $30 million investments in production, because there is a market for it. And so we've seen a higher end for that. And also you've got these really cool shows like, Monster Rock at Sea. So a lot of live shows, also particularly music festivals, huge. Definitely see that as a huge growing area for people who are interested in the music side of things. Those are jobs, a lot of jobs that just weren't around, 10 years ago. And then you've got like people to manage. And then, I mean, the most recent trend is the concept of, YouTube artists, or influencer, bloggers that turn to vloggers that turn to, they are now YouTube stars. And that obviously didn't exist 10 years ago. So supporting those brands now are cool jobs because, especially for a young person, because they don't pay well and you'd have to do a lot of things because they're, as much as, someone can have 9 million followers, there's still not a whole lot of money in it, even though they're that visible. So interesting jobs, you get to do a lot of hands-on stuff. But, and then there's the space that manages all the, I mean, now those guys have agents, and they have branding people that they work with. So, the industry is constantly evolving. Also a growing area for us is, sort of the death of print publication, magazines, and newspaper, and they've all gone online. And as they've gone online, they are now hiring people with a more skewed to people who not only can write articles, but they can produce videos that go along with it. So again, sort of more of a 360 type of job where you get to do a lot and are exposed to a lot. And the people that are coming out of college these days all have the skills where, like, let's say more mature people such as, the Bruins, like we may be, like our assumed skill was Office, how to do, Word and Excel. And now they're like, oh, you know how to do, either Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere or all these tools, or GarageBand or Pro Tools or whatever it is. It's like they can mix music, they can create movies, and with software that they are getting out of college and they know it. So a lot of opportunities. And I think the biggest thing that I always want to make a point to is, again, 10 years ago, the only place you could go, you're like, are you going to go to New York or Los Angeles? Now, it's like, if you don't need to come here, don't come here. These jobs are available in every major city. Everyone is producing content. Marketing agencies are now production companies. And not everyone is outsourcing all their content production to LA anymore. Like before, you'd have to say, hey, we're gonna have to shoot a commercial. Oh, we got to go to Hollywood. Now you've got, all these people, a lot of small businesses are investing in video production for their social media, for their websites. And so you have a production community that is in a lot of major cities. You don't necessarily need to come here for these cool jobs anymore, which is great because also, if you stick to a sort of secondary or tertiary market, your competition isn't going to be as great. So that didn't exist 10 years ago as much as it does now.
That is so interesting. I'm looking now at one of the questions we got from our RSVP form. And so what advice do you have for graduates who don't have a degree in film, but are looking for catch-up work to gain relevant experience and skills for the industry?
I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. A lot of students asked that the other night at ENN. They're like, well, what was your major? I'm like, I was sociology. I studied organizations and entrepreneurship. They're like, what? Most of the people that I come across, and more, do not have a film school background. Some people maybe have minored in it, like a lot of the students who we work with from UCLA, do study it, but it's not as their major. And so it's not necessary. So let's get that off the table. It doesn't mean that someone is more skilled, because quite frankly, people are not hiring you for filmmaking schools out of college. It's filmmaking skills. So you do have a level playing field where the other person may have some experience. They have experience shooting student films. Quite frankly, that's almost, again, an assumed thing. And so you're better off getting an experience at an internship or working at in the aspect of the industry that you intend to pursue. It's because they're more translatable skills. Again, sort of that kid that's saying, hey, I'm an award-winning filmmaker. They're like, great. Do you know how to answer a telephone? Can you return correspondence? Because that's what I'm hiring you for. And that's that's what we see.
Another great question we got says, I'm 35 and wanted to know if it was too late to switch career paths from graphic design and marketing to entertainment. I know a little about motion graphics, visual effects, and I really enjoy the movie making process. Any advice for someone my age and skill set?
That's a tough one. It's doable if you're understanding of the arena that you're going to. Because if you're in LA trying to pursue this, is going to be more challenging, because most of these jobs are, if you are making a transition, you're going to have to sort of give up something. And mostly what that is financial compensation. And, not to bring in the School of Economics here, but when Canada's economy, when the price of oil went down, the Canadian economy goes down, our exchange rate relative to the Canadian dollar flipped. It went from sort of a parity 1-to-1 to now a discount. And so all the jobs flock back up to Canada, not all, but quite a few of them. So it depletes the available jobs in the United States already. So motion graphics is certainly a challenging area, because also you've got, animation schools that are churning out motion graphic artists, animators at a volume that, DreamWorks and Pixar cannot consume. You cannot consume all of them. So a lot of people are rushing towards what they know, sort of like the A-list players in the space. There are, for every one of those, there's, 20 to 30 names of companies that you haven't heard of. And so it is doable, but you also have to understand the economic reality of it. And it's almost like, starting from scratch again. But what you can do is you can take a portfolio of work. You can take take the long game, which is if you do have an existing profession and you're able to earn a living at it, spend that time networking and getting a better understanding of what that transition would look like. Start reaching out to people. And people are very receptive. Everyone's sort of been at a wiggle point in their career. And so when someone contacts them saying, hey, you know what, whether it be LinkedIn or UCLA One or something along those lines, they're very receptive. I've never had anyone be totally skunked. Like, they've reached out to, like we say, like 3 to 5 people, and always get someone that'll sit on the phone with them for about 60 minutes, total strangers. But again, you have to ask. It's challenging, but like all things, it's as doable as you're willing to work for it. It will be hard though, for sure, but possible.
So before we move to our audience questions, one more from the RSVP form said, what was the best piece of advice that someone offered you in your career?
Best piece of advice. Well, it's funny you say that, because I actually was just having this conversation today, and I actually said, because I always, whenever I'm talking to a group of people or whatever, I'm always saying, what was the best piece of advice someone ever gave you? And one of the simplest pieces of advice from someone that had been around in the industry a long period of time, they had very simple advice, and he said, be on time and be likable. Because we do spend a lot of time with the people we're working with, and it doesn't always boil down to skills, because you could have, you could have the best skill on the planet, but depending on, sort of how technical that job is, they may go more with a personality and an aptitude or ability to learn and grow with the company. It's, the best advice is tough because depends sort of on the segment, but I think the best advice I could give is understand what you're doing and how difficult a process it is. I'm not saying it to dissuade someone, but think it through before you jump in, because the attrition rate is crazy, and you're better off sort of going in with eyes wide open so you understand it, because we see people generally getting like a 2-year eddy where they're trying to figure it out as they're trying to earn money, and it's a very tough cycle to get out of. So I'd say understand and engage as many people as you possibly can, because it's a difficult task and it's made more difficult when you try to do it by yourself.
So as we move into taking some questions from the audience, just a reminder for everyone that's watching, if you'd like to submit a question for Brad, you can use the live chat function on your screen. The first question that we have comes from Karen, and she says, what are some ways I can get more involved with peer level networking?
Oh, that's a good one. There are a lot of opportunities for peer level networking, depending on where you are. If like you're in Omaha, Nebraska, might be a little more tough, or a little tougher. But there are so many organizations, there are, film societies and, film organizations, and anything that you have a professional interest in. There are, sort of tentpole organizations like professional groups that service the entire industry. They're always having events. There are, any sort of sub-segment, if, there's for every group, then there's like a women's version of it. There's Black filmmakers, there's, Pan-Asian, there's so many different subsets where you can, sort of go macro, and then also sort of go people that maybe have more similar experiences to you. And so it's just a matter of doing the research. Then there's, sort of the major organizations, all the, one thing I always try and recommend to people is getting involved, like all the major, like, DGA, SAG, Writers Guild, they all have these great foundations, like Grammys, music has music cares. They have these great foundations that are always doing events. And so how awesome is that you get to, maybe volunteer at one of the events, meet people who are sort of in that same boat, and also have opportunities to meet people, who may be potential future mentors. And it also is, sticks you in that realm of, looking like you're sort of in the industry, even though you might not be. Because one of the things that we see, we're trying to help people with the process is, in the back of every employer's mind, especially in early January, is, did this person just wake up this morning and say, I want to get in show business? When you see that resume that doesn't have any history on it. And so those are ways that you can be peripherally involved with the industry. I mean, nothing beats, having a name brand resume as far as work on the top of the resume, but you can have contact within the industry. So at least looks like you've demonstrated an ongoing interest in the industry, even if, like some people, like some of the students we worked with at ENN, they're in a tough spot because, they need to work, when they're not in class, they need to work, and they need to have something that earns them money. And so they are not able to take those internships. And so I'm like, look for micro opportunities, look for things within those organizations. I mean, we're in LA, there are so many film festivals and film markets here. Always an opportunity to volunteer and network. And, like I said, they're like little micro commitments. You can do it for a day, a couple days, or obviously organizations that have longer opportunities as well.
Right.
And UCLA.
Yeah, exactly. Our next question is from Nekaron. He said, how does one become a production assistant? I heard it was a gateway to TV writing. Is that true?
Two questions in that one. The second one is no, it's not. We'll go back to that one. But the first one is the production assistant. I mean, that's sort of like the textbook entry-level job. That is, there's a great website, Anonymous Production Assistant. I strongly recommend it. And it's all about sort of that journey of being the PA, and getting those jobs. You get them however you possibly can. It's obviously everyone wants to get paid, fully compensated for work in a production. There are ways to get the experience which will allow you to maybe be considered for something that pays a little bit or a little bit more. There's obviously every school has student film projects you can work on. For me, I think my first couple production jobs, I worked on, I think when I was at UCLA, I worked on music videos when they actually used to make them, and commercials. And, I just said, I'm like, hey, I'll do anything. I don't care. I maybe it was paid, maybe I wasn't paid. I don't know. But I was more interested in doing it, just to get the experience so I could, go and possibly do it elsewhere. And I think the first legit production experience I had was I worked as a second assistant director on a feature film for, like 2.5, 3 weeks in downtown. We shot these horrible hours, but that's how I got my experience. And then I got paid as a PA to do it, on actual larger productions. But again, that's where the network helps. PAs, people are hiring PAs left and right. There's ways to sort of go up the food chain. Again, having a network helps, and that's where the peer level network helps, because that guy who's your classmate, maybe he just turned down a job and said, hey, you know what, I can't do it, but my buddy can. A lot of sort of lateral peer level job passing back and forth. But the key thing is on that one is networking, being proactive, and again, letting everybody know that this is what you're doing. Like your best efforts you're going to get, or your best results are going to come from shouting this information. We tend to sort of, like, the more grandiose our dream, the more we tend to whisper, like, I think I'm going to get into film production. I don't know, maybe not. And then instead, you literally should be like, hey, you know what? I really am looking to get into the film or TV industry. I'm looking for an entry-level PA job, and sell that to everybody. So at least you have your minions out there, keeping you present of mind. There are a number of organizations, that you can, again, sort of the film groups, that you can be a part of. Again, the Anonymous Production Assistant is an awesome resource for this particular area, because that's all they deal with is sort of the life of a PA, and it's actually, I love the guy's sense of humor. It's hilarious, and all very good advice also. It's you have to get it however you possibly can. I mean, I don't mean to plug our company, but like, we obviously have job listings. You can go on Craigslist, which I stare people away. They're a little sketchier circumstances. There's other websites. There's Staff Me Up is another website. Production Beast is another website. But truly, if you had to do only one thing, as much as I've created an entire industry around helping random people hire random people, the network is your best singular event. But think of it like a toolbox. You want multiple tools. There is no one answer. You do it all. And because it's so transient, it's like you get a day job here and there. You're perpetually looking for work when you're sort of looking for a PA. But just understand, where that's going to take you. I think the biggest misconception is that it's a gateway to being a TV writer, which it is not necessarily. I mean, you look in this town and you find 10 people that are doing the job. They all got there 10 different ways. But there is no natural progression to being a writer from being a PA. It's been done, I'm sure, but it's not a natural progress.
That's a good lead in to the question from Ben. He said, is it true I need to start in the mailroom to break into the entertainment industry, especially if I want to be an agent?
That's a good one. It's not true. For me, from my perspective and the way that I've seen people manage their careers, I feel it's one of the best jobs you possibly can get. If you have, not only obviously if you have an interest in talent management or being an agent, it's critical. But it gives you a broad survey of how the industry works. there's this woman, Kate Lupo, who runs this entry-level Hollywood program, and she gives this great analogy of the agent, it's sort of the talent management agency side is like the hub of the spoke. No one talks to each other outside of that, and everyone has to go through the agents, managers, mostly the agents. So you get to see a lot of how the business actually works. It is like Grand Central Station. It's like, when you're working on a film or TV set, being in the production department is the hub. Like everybody goes through, no one talks to each other. You have to ask them to ask the other person. Very similar, not quite as transactional, but the agency business. And plus now with them making enormous investments in sports management and sports and branding, and lifestyle brands, it really is, to me, it's, if I were starting out again, that's where I would go, because that's where my interests are. I enjoy the entirety of the business, and you get to learn it, and you get to learn it at a very high level. And part of it is, whether it's on our side or elsewhere, you'll see a lot of times you'll see an employer say must have 1 to 2 years agency experience. It's because it is there's one HR professional at one of the big agencies, I won't say who it is, but she refers to it as graduate school for entertainment, because you learn that much. It's a great learning curve, very steep, very exciting. Also, you're networking at a peer level. And so you're trained in a very good way to get a really solid understanding of the industry. And I think the biggest misconception with this path is, and when I pitch it to people, like, I don't want to be an agent. I'm like, most people aren't. They stay, they do their time, and they get kicked out. And the young man that was interested in TV writing, sometimes a route is to go in and understand and go, possibly get in like in whoever's TV, like in the TV lit department. Then you get to understand all the players, how it works, who's doing what. And so one of your clients, hey, what, they just got a job as a showrunner. They need an assistant. And you say, hey, boss man, Joe Smith just got a show and he needs an assistant. I'd love to go and apply for that job. And so a lot of it, people feed out of that program to all areas of the industry. So I think the biggest misconception is, like, I don't want to become an agent. Most people don't. I mean, most people don't want to become agents. Most people don't end up being agents that go through there, and because most people don't want to be agents. But if you want to be an agent, it's a great route to go for sure. Very, very competitive. You used to be competing with people with literally like JDs and MBAs, all vying for these awesome jobs that pay, $12.52 an hour. So again, super competitive, not necessary for everybody. But to me, it's one of the best ways as an entry point into the industry, depending on what your level of interest is.
From Efren, he writes, what recommendations do you have regarding a job search strategy?
Is he online? Can we get like a more specific segment?
I think maybe in starting out, what would be your tips for how to organize the job search strategy?
The first thing is you got to make sure that you actually are ready to do it. I think people have a lot of enthusiasm, making sure that they have the skills and experience that the employers are looking for. And then again, it's obviously a common thread we're talking about, networking. Again, super, super critical. To learn more about the industry and find out where you'll likely be a best skills match. Obviously researching and going to websites that actually publish these things. Again, we're not the only people that do it. Career centers can be somewhat helpful. They rarely have specific knowledge of this industry, especially if they're outside of Los Angeles. They sort of get into a generic career catch-all. But doing the research, networking, finding job leads, whether it's on our website or elsewhere, there's other resources. There's this UTA job list. Entry-level person probably not very good fit for most of those. But it's just, again, sort of getting into it. It's like, like when we all went to school, in elementary school, and you started taking some form of math, like algebra, and at the first day of school, you look at the back, you're like, holy smokes, how in the hell am I going to possibly do this? And the answer is because you do it a little bit each day. And it just progresses forward. And so take a systematic approach, just like you would with schoolwork. I think a lot of people sort of shoot from the hip. They're like, I'm going to do this today. I'm going to do this today. It's like, in my outside interests, I help people train for, crazy events like Ironman or marathon. And how do you get to the finish line is with an idea, sort of your dream. And then you actually have to have a sort of a training plan, or in this case, a roadmap to success. And, keep looping back and seeing if it's being effective. And again, engaging as many people as possible, because you will learn so much in the first 6 months to 2 years. Why not tap into that knowledge base? Someone say, no, don't do this. Everyone goes down this crazy rabbit hole at some point. I think this was many years ago when the Alumni Association had like a database, and this kid, set up a lunch with me, and he said that, he's working at the DGA, the Directors Guild. And I'm like, what? I'm like, okay. I'm like, he's like, I'm working there because I want to become a director. And I think that's, that would make sense. And I'm like, well, okay, I could appreciate where that would make sense, but, that's probably, not the best course of action, if that's what you want to do. So, having that mentorship, it's, like I always say when we ever stuff at UCLA, I'm like, having a mentor is like having a big brother or sister who's going to say, like, hey, I can teach you how to sneak out with mom and dad not knowing. They give you shortcuts. And that like I said, it's take it with the degree of seriousness that it requires, and be systematic about it, and involve as many people as you possibly can. Research, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to bother people. The people that do that seem to be the ones that are successful. There's a young man that I've been working with. He's at Vanderbilt, so he doesn't have access to this. But he is perhaps in the however many years, 17 years I've been doing this, 15 years I've been doing this, he is probably the most prepared person I've ever seen being a senior in college. And he is taking it, he is reading every book possible. He is reading the trades. He knows what he is getting involved in. Like, if I could buy stock in a human being, I would buy stock in this guy, because he's giving it the level of consideration and work that it requires. And he'll be successful, no doubts.
So we have time for one last question from the audience. It's a follow-up from Efren, and he says, are there any initiatives in the industry that allow for more diversity? Is it something that you think the industry is working towards?
Yeah, it's obviously within the last year, it's definitely been on the front burner, which I think, for me personally, I think is a good thing, because it's an issue, and like all things, I consider it a problem. Problems are not solved on their own generally. A lot of companies, for me, it's sort of a personal passion area, because a lot of people that otherwise have never had access to the entertainment industry have been given access via our website. Because obviously, if you don't know anybody, the first thing you're going to do is type in, entertainment jobs, entertainment careers, and simply the fact that we're #1 in the Google search results, we have a very, very diverse base of users. And so for me, it's like, that is my tribe of people. Those are the people that we try and help. And so I'm very passionate about it. And so I'm always looking out for other companies who are interested in the Academy is going to launch a program this summer that is going to address sort of special opportunities for people who've been sort of what I could say historically excluded from the industry, and giving them sort of an interesting level of access and mentorship and guidance. But there are a lot of industries that do it. A lot of companies are attacking it from the inside. And I think for me, it's like NBC Universal does an amazing job. Because for years, I think it seemed to be people were saying they were hiring diversity officers, and it was like, oh, this is what we're doing. We're hiring someone to solve the problem. And then there's companies that actually are solving the problem. And to me, it's a night and day difference from 15 years ago. There's a lot of support, regardless of whatever group that maybe someone identifies with. There are support groups, industry-wide, and then sometimes even within the company, they have like these great employee resource groups. So there are a lot of people that are what I consider legitimately solving the problem, where I think for years it's been saying, oh, this is a complex problem with no real solution. But I think that we're right on the bubble. And I think part of it is the hiring process has changed radically. The people who are in the hiring positions are different than they were 15 years ago. And so I see a massive acceleration. And for me, I think, we're sort of right on the bubble of greater parity and having the industry reflect the viewership and the people who consume it.
So Brad, as we wrap up, what would you say are the top 3 things that you want Bruins to take away from tonight's discussion?
Bruins, don't talk to Trojans. Now, sadly enough, I always have to say this. I'm like, Trojans generally out-network us. That always kills me. So 3 takeaways. Some key takeaways would be to, number 1, understand what you're getting into. Take it with the level of competition that actually exists out there. It's not something that you can sort of stroll into and expect to be successful. It's just like getting into UCLA. Again, a lot of people want to get in the industry. A lot of people want to get into UCLA. It goes to the people who typically put in the work to get there. It's like I say, it's just understand the landscape. The second one would be, don't be afraid to engage everybody. Don't whisper this. Yell it out. Engage people as much as you can, because this is a super challenging. It's like I give the same advice whether someone wants to start their own company or get into the entertainment stream. Like, you're going to have to engage everyone you possibly know in order to do this, because the resources, when you sort of broadcast out into that sort of third tier of your network, that's oddly enough where sometimes interesting results will come in, like, oh, you know what? I actually know somebody, or my cousin, or the people that you haven't talked to a whole lot. They tend to yield much better results than your primary network, because you tend to talk to them all the time, and there's just not that many of them. So, engaging as many people as you possibly can, and then work at it. It's an industry based on desire, right? Because people are very passionate about it, but passion without work, it just doesn't work. You need to work at this. You need to spend the time to understand the industry. You need to understand that you're going to be competing with people like that kid at Vanderbilt who's been studying this for a year. He's already networking in LA and he's not in Los Angeles. That's the kind of person that you're competing with. And so you just have to understand that the playing field that you're getting into, and again, tap the network, more gas, less brake. You're going to put your own brakes on naturally. So, put on the gas. Don't be bashful about asking fellow Bruins for help. Like last night we had a room of, hundreds of people who are like, you've got, 50 tables of alumni who are giving up their, midweek evening and battling that horrible traffic to get to UCLA to help students. And so, there are a lot of people that will help. It seems crazy, but like I said, when I've had people reach out to 3 to 5 people, they've never been short. They've never come back with no results. And do the work, read, study the industry. It's just, you have to understand that it's a business. It's creative, but it's obviously an enormous business, and you have to treat it the same way.
Thanks, Brad. Your advice and your experience have been so helpful in shedding a light on the opportunities and the challenges in entertainment. And for those questions that we didn't get to, you can find Brad on UCLA One, and it's a great way to connect with him and ask questions and connect with mentors. To those of you who are watching, thank you again for joining us and participating in the discussion. If you missed a portion of tonight's event or you want to share it with others, you can find the recording on the UCLA Alumni YouTube channel. Also, as mentioned in our intro, this is the first event in our Bruin Career Insights series. So share your questions, your thoughts, and your ideas with us, because we want to bring you tailored programming that we can't do without your input. So send us an email at careerprograms@alumni.ucla.edu. Brad and everyone who watched, and a thank you again to Blue, Gold, and Life members who make events like this possible. We'll see you in February for our next Bruin Career Insights event, and have a good evening and go Bruins.